Hello and evening, good welcome everybody. I'm Councillor Danielle Lind and I'm Chair of Children and Young People Scrutiny Review Board on Derby City Council. We will go through with introductions, starting on the right side, going forward back. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Tracy Churchill, Head Teacher at St Joseph's Primary in Derby.
Councillor John Whitby, recently elected for Mackworth. Thank you.
Gora Pandey, Councillor for Mackworth. Thank you.
Tracy Pearce, Councillor for Derwent.
Miles Patterson, Councillor in Mickleover.
Sue-Ann Lim, Director of Early Help and Children's Social Care. Thank you.
Fiona Colton, Head of Early Help Services.
Right, thank you everybody. Apologies. So far I've had apologies from Councillor Bonser, Nikki Fenton and Andy Smith. Any further apologies? No further apologies. Thank you. Late items, no late items to be introduced by myself today. Declarations of interest.
Yeah, Chair, I'm never quite sure how this is meant to go, but I'm a Derby City Council foster carer, so obviously I've put it on the interest thing, but I'm never quite sure whether you should do it every meeting or just once or whatever, but I am a Derby City Council foster carer.
Thank you. No further. Okay, so moving over to item 4 now, minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of March. Can we all agree they're a true and accurate record of the last meeting, please? Take silence as agreement, unless anybody's against. Nobody against? Okay, so the minutes have passed, thank you. So moving on to item 5 now, the outcome of Derby's inspection of the local authority children's services, and I'm handing over to Sue-Ann. Thank you, Sue-Ann.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm absolutely delighted to bring this report and presentation to Children's Scrutiny this evening. Next slide. So just to provide a little bit of context around our inspection, this is the first time we've had a judgment inspection for the whole of Children's Services for 5 years. And during that period, we were inspected as being good overall, which is still a huge achievement. But we have been working on improving our position over the past 5 years. We also have had unjudged inspections as well in 2019, and in 2021 we had a joint targeted area inspection on child abuse and also a focused visit around our children in care sufficiency and permanence. After that, next slide please. Thank you. So quite a few recommendations after the 2017 inspection, which, as I've said, we have been absolutely working on in terms of improvement of those particular areas, and we had 11 recommendations. And during the inspection in March this year, Ofsted revisited every single one, wanting to understand and evidence progress that was made. Thank you. Next slide. So we were inspected under a new framework. So the previous inspection was single inspection framework, and this was the ILACS inspection, which is the inspection of local authority children's services. And it is a whole system approach to inspections, and it looks at the whole journey of the child, right from early help right through to adoption. We had, because we were previously rated and judged good, we had a short inspection of 5 days in March, and the areas that the inspectors looked at are as follows, and making sure that we are absolutely focused on the outcomes for children. So it goes through the journey through early help services, through help and protection and child protection, children in care, and then through to our children in care and care leavers. Thank you. So in terms of what did inspectors do? So they are absolutely forensic, and for the 2 weeks, even though they're only on site for 1 week, they are really active in the week before. So they met in the week before with the Cabinet member Yvonne Williams, Chief Executive Paul, the independent chair of the Derby and Derbyshire Safeguarding Partnership, Steve Atkinson, and with the Director of Children's Services, Andy Smith, and all of those had interviews. During the course of the inspection and the evidence in advance that we had to submit, there were 275 different pieces of evidence that we had to upload. Some of that is a requirement, some of that is around us evidencing progress that we'd made against the previous recommendations. And then they requested a further 30 pieces of information during the actual inspection fieldwork. They reviewed and spoke to a variety of staff and particularly children and young people. So 12 children and young people were spoken with, and they were looking at what the impact had been during the last 6 months. 50 of our colleagues, and there were social workers and early help workers and managers, were spoken to across all of the services, and looked at particular casework, etc. 6 members of our Children in Care Council were in a meeting with Ofsted, and also 4 of our foster carers and 4 adopters were spoken with. They also spoke with designated teachers in our schools and within and outside the city, and also with our care leavers as well. So they really did a deep dive and spoke to a lot of different people to make sure that information was triangulated. So we had to wait an incredible amount of time to the actual publication. Next slide, please. But after that first week, we were told initially, confidentially, that the findings from Ofsted were significantly improved from last time, and we are absolutely delighted that across all sectors the impact of leaders on social work practice was outstanding. The experiences and progress of children who need help and protection was judged as outstanding, and the experiences of care leavers and children, whilst remain good, that's still an excellent judgment. And the overall effectiveness for the whole of the services was outstanding. So we'd actually improved from our previous position 5 years ago. So we were absolutely delighted with that. The report is worth reading. There are lots and lots of highlights in the report, and too many really to talk about this evening. However, one particular highlight is around the committed senior leadership at all levels within Derby, and the fact that our children and families receive a consistently good and often outstanding response from services. We make sure that the right children get the right help when they need it. Particularly for this meeting, corporate support and investment was recognised, and given the financial situation, that is incredible achievement by Derby City Council, and it prioritises resources for vulnerable children. Senior leaders all across the organisation absolutely place the child at the centre of work, and our service culture and our strength-based approach was consistent, whoever was spoken with. So that was great. Next slide, please. Okay. So in terms of help and protection, this includes early help as well. As I said, we go through the journey of the child. So when partners or members of the general public refer children and families into the service, Ofsted found that they were responded to appropriately and timely. that the thresholds that we have agreed as a partnership were consistently and appropriately applied. They found that there was limited drift and delay, and there were good quality assessments with direct work and plans that met the needs of those children and young people. Really pleasing was the effective monitoring of our children missing education, elective home education aspect, and we have a very robust approach to children missing education. Quality of return interviews when children go missing was seen as a strength, and particularly the quality of those interviews was highlighted in the report, and they have improved since the last inspection. Our overall partnership working is effective and achieves best outcomes for children. We are able to evidence that our children's voices are effectively captured and that they inform and drive the plans for children and families. And PLO is public law outlined, so this is just before we enter into care proceedings for children. So it's the period of work to do to try and ensure that we prevent care proceedings happening. So we have family group conferencing and lots of specific interventions to try and ensure that children can remain wherever possible with their families. Of particular note was our services for disabled children and young people at the Lighthouse. They were particularly picked out as being effective and good quality. Our children in care and care leavers, only children looked after, children only come into care if it's in their best interests. So whilst we do have higher levels of children in care, those children who are received into care, they meet threshold, and that is in their best interests to be in care. Our children said to Ofsted that they feel listened to, and that workers know them well, and that their plans are smart, which is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. They value their independent reviewing officers, and the independent reviewing officer service has a very strong and robust challenge on the rest of the service to ensure that children's rights are protected. Where we have got children in placements where there are where there are risks, these are proactively managed, and the majority of our placements are stable. We do have a number of placement sufficiency issues, but the majority of 600 placements are stable. We have a sensitive and appropriate support for all in terms of our diversity approach with our unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. And Ofsted were particularly impressed with how we'd approached this with a specialist team, and that we had worked with across the council and with Derby Homes to ensure that any young people who were unaccompanied asylum-seeking children actually had the best, most appropriate intervention. We have a very strong virtual school, and the virtual head, Graham Ferguson, is a very, very strong paragraph within the report. He works tirelessly to ensure that all looked after children have packages and the access to education that they need. Our fostering assessments were considered as good, and there was appropriate scrutiny from the panel, and our care leavers were supported to have positive outcomes by passionate PAs, and there's some really good quotes in the report around what young people said about their PAs. Thank you. Next slide. Okay. So the impact of leaders. So what they found were passionate and loyal workers who work in Derby Children's Services, and in all of the single inspection framework, the joint targeted agency inspection and the focus visit recommendations had been acted on and improved or addressed. They considered that we as a service and as a council were self-aware and leaders were really well connected to frontline practice at all levels. Again, that really strong corporate support and the corporate parenting board really been able to evidence that they're making a difference to children in Derby. Children at the centre of work and the influence decisions. Senior managers and leaders are visible, accessible and valued in the organisation and by our staff, and we have really good partnerships. Our staff benefit from regular and reflective supervision. And finally, our strength-based model of practice is embedded and consistently applied. Thank you. So, we still have some recommendations, but not as many as 5 years ago. So one of the areas was around life story work could be strengthened, and there we have a deadline of 19th of August to get a plan ready to send back to Ofsted around that. And the second one was around sufficiency of placement choice and location for our children in care. And we do know nationally there is a sufficiency challenge for all local authorities in achieving the right amount of places in the right area where they live. So those are the two areas that we have as recommendations. And then finally, our next steps. We've done quite a lot of reflection alongside our colleagues since the 11th of May when the inspection was published. And we have also been approached already to support peers with their inspection preparations and other parts of their work and development. So that's been regional and also some national requests as well. We have till the 19th of August to develop our improvement plan against those two recommendations, and we already have made inroads onto addressing those already. We're not waiting till the 19th of August, and then we will have an ongoing service development with further targeted deep dive and quality assurance assessments to make sure that we continue to retain outstanding. We don't intend to drop down. We're not complacent, and we will be working hard. So happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sue Ann. I'm sure the board will join me in thanking the continued hard work and dedication of officers, particularly in regards to the looked after children in Derby City. And I think you'll do a fantastic job, and your hard work dedication should be noted, and I would like you to pass that on to the team. Regarding recommendations, can you tell us what measures are being taken currently to address local sufficiency, please? Thank you.
Yeah. So we're working with our commissioning colleagues who have a accommodation strategy that is emerging. So that's a number of strands where they are looking at frameworks locally for all ranges of children, whether that's in supported accommodation 16, 17-year-old or residential block contracting. So we're looking at different contracting arrangements rather than spot purchase at the moment. We're also working with our D2N2 colleagues so to look at economies of scale. And that we've already done some work with our fostering service to look at what economies of scale and recruitment that we can do on more of a macro level. We're also looking to work with our health colleagues because we know that some of the needs of children cross over both education and health. So just to purely source accommodation from a social care perspective actually doesn't necessarily meet the whole need of that child. So we are in discussions with both education and with health to look at a joint commissioning process for that very sort of high needs complex group that unfortunately, because of their needs, sometimes then have significant placement breakdowns. So we have a whole range of different steps that commissioning are taking to actually address that one. In terms of the life story work, we've already recruited 3 additional members of staff who are dedicated to working with children to ensure their life story work begins at the point of entry into the system. Whilst the action really was for our children in care, actually we feel that it's important that any child that touches our service, whether that's in the locality, for safeguarding reasons, there is something that child and that family take away around what their story is. So we're looking at that whole life journey for life story work, and that's already begun. So we'll be able to report back on the progress of that at a later scrutiny. Thank you.
Any questions from the floor? Councillor Whitby.
Yeah, thank you, Swan. Yeah, obviously this is a staggering achievement. It is. It's more or less miraculous, to be honest, given the financial challenges the council faces, all local authorities face. So yeah, amazing. I was just going to ask, on the same issue of sufficiency of placements, do you know how many places we currently have placed outside Derby at the moment? Or is that a Sarah Walker question?
To get an accurate number, it probably is a performance, but we probably have around about, I think it's about 60% outside the 20 boundary. So we have a 20-mile boundary that we're measured on, because Derby is such a small unitary. Yeah, we probably have about 60.
So you obviously mentioned D2N2, which obviously makes a lot of sense, but are we not looking more, I don't know, wider regionally or even nationally? I mean, is this not a government issue to some extent, if we need this many specialised placements all over the place?
Yeah, I think certainly the recent Josh McAllister Care Review that's been issued for comment and response by central government provides opportunities nationally for regional care consortiums to be developed on a regional basis, and I look forward to seeing what that looks like, and that is around local authorities having more economies of scale, rather than the private sector who have kind of taken this space. So I think, yes, nationally, I think there are some clear directions that could be taken.
Let's say something really rhetorical, really. I mean, the only thing that I'm afraid of with this, it's a fantastic achievement, but I just wonder whether the public are going to see this and think, oh, everything's fine with Derby. The children care in Derby is brilliant. Children's services is brilliant. But obviously the Ofsted aren't looking at the financial challenges, I presume, and sort of other wider provision and stuff, all those other things, apart from the council. And they're monumentally difficult, aren't they? And it's like every year we're just building millions more into the budget because we have to. And that obviously takes from other parts of the council that we have to spend money on. And anyway, I just thought I'd say that. Yeah, it's not a question, I'm just saying that. It's a fear.
Thank you. Any further questions? Nope. Okay, so we move over to the recommendations then, 2.1 and 2.2. So to consider the presentation, note the Ofsted letter regarding the inspection of local authority children's services in March. I gather you all looked at the letter. And 2.2, to make any further comments or recommendations following discussions on the presentations received. Are there any further comment or recommendations? No? Okay, thank you. Moving on now then to item 6 on the agenda. Now, officers have asked to defer this item. They were due to present it today. However, there's now no longer an officer available to present this item to us this evening, so it's been asked to defer. Officers have assured me that there'll still be time in September at the next meeting before legislation passing and needing to make decisions locally. So there is still time to influence that. So are we all happy to defer that item? Yeah? Okay, so that's unanimous then. So we're moving over now to item 7. So item 7, development of a family hub model for Derby. So I think I'm passing over to Fiona Colton. Thank you.
You are. Thank you. Just wait for Lindsay to... There we go. You can go on to the first one, Lindsay. So what I plan to do tonight is to just give you an overview of what the Family Hub initiative is and where we're at in Derby as far as working through it. For anybody who's been around a long time, it is a similar model to what was Sure Start local programmes, children's centres, but on a wider scale. And I think it's important to recognise that it is the latest initiative from the Department for Education, but it is about supporting vulnerable families with children and young people 0 to 19 and up to 25 for SEND. It's based on the Thrive conceptual model of prevention, promotion and thriving, and it expects that relational approach with partners around integration and co-production with families. So whatever plan we have needs to be co-produced with families. And the following principles are an understanding of the importance of early help and prevention. And, you know, I've been the head of early help for 11 years now, and I think the commitment from the local authority and from elected members has always been really positive, and this can only enhance it further. Use of evidence-based interventions, and anybody that was here when I presented our early help report will know that we as a local authority have moved to delivery of many more evidence-based interventions with families, with children, young people and their parents. A modular flexible approach, and when you see the hub model you'll see what I mean by that, but obviously looking at each area of the work and making sure that we're flexible in our approach to it. It does require commitment from all partners, so whilst the local authority, I'm the single point of contact, the local authority will be the fund holders. There is an expectation that this is around equal partnership working and delivery of services by our partners. And that goes on to say about integrated health and public health priorities and Start for Life, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail later, and that we work with our voluntary and wider community sector and support. Next slide, Lindsay, please. Okay, so Family Hubs is about transformation, and they want us to transform our existing services. So we did submit a bid on the 17th of December 2021 for in excess of 700k to deliver a Family Hubs model. But we made a decision that with or without funding, this would be our direction of travel for the city to a Family Hubs model. And then at the end of March, we were nominated as one of 75 councils eligible for Start for Life Family Hub funding. And you'll see that I've got new bid and an exclamation mark because I thought I'd be bid writing again. Actually, we don't have to, and there's more details as we move forward. Next slide, please. So, what have we done so far? We were fortunate, probably about September last year, that we received funding via our East Midlands Directors of Children's Services, and we became part of an East Midlands Family Hub group. So we got 40k to spend on development work, getting our project up and running, and we've entered into partnership with our voluntary sector to help us to do that. we submitted the bid for the Family Hubs transformation, and we set up a strategic board, and our first official meeting was the 1st of March this year, and that's partners at a strategic decision-making level as an overall board. And we have our second meeting on Wednesday of this week, and we've created a Family Hubs model, and we needed to do that as part of the initial bid. Thanks, Lindsay. Okay, so you won't be able to see that. So here's some amazing, truly Peter Passion. Here's some lessons from learning that I didn't use common language. So it's easy to take these away and to be able to see them. Okay, so the development of this model came out of some creations of my own that I have to say were really poor to start with. But what I'd got was the services, it was just the way I'd presented it, and some work that we did to form the transformation bid. We used our partners from health, both Sue Ann and Andy, Councillor Williams as the lead member, Pauline Anderson as the Director of Learning, etc. And we looked at, really, if you look at the diagram, it gives you 7 with the digital offer, but 6 key features around services that we felt should be involved in a Family Hubs model. So obviously we've got employment and skills with things like Department for Work and Pensions, Derby College, adult learning, the university, etc. The 0 to 19 health services, so right from midwifery services right through to drug and alcohol services for 0 to 18-year-olds, public health nursing, health visitors, etc. Along the bottom, specialist services, and that does include our children with special educational needs, but also our CAMS services, things like young carers, some of our voluntary organisations, Umbrella, Funability, etc. Young people's spaces, which included our schools provision, early years settings, things like our parent carers together, sit in both specialist services but also in young people, parks, spaces, youth activity. We'd sort of got an asterisk with City Key, cultural and leisure, so making use of our own provided services and what could we do for families. Moving on to community resilience, so looking at all of those inclusion aspects, things like community safety, place-based risk, our community action, food for thought, some of those things that were set up as part of the COVID response around Better Together. And then obviously, dotted onto that, it would be rude of me not to include early help and children's social care, particularly for those vulnerable and families. What we've said as we've presented this is that this is not a finished item. It's an absolute start, and it was the start of a group of a few individuals. What we've been doing with the money that we've had through the East Midlands Group, we've had a number of workshops where we've had professionals from each of the... so we've had 6 workshops headed by the titles on the hub, and we've had individuals, both frontline workers and strategic directors or strategic partners in the organisations have come to a workshop, and we've said to them, what do you think of this? What's working well? So we've stuck with the way we work in early help and children's social care with the strengths-based model. What's working well? What are we worried about? What do we need to do next? What are some of the challenges? And we're going to present our findings to our strategic group on Wednesday. So it's still work in action. I feel like I'll probably be coming back at some point to update, but that's where we're at the moment. Okay, Lindsay, we can move on. We also had to put a timeline together. Now, I didn't print this because already we've lost some of those dates, and that's down to the Department for Education in some cases where information's been delayed, etc. But what we needed to do was to have a timeline, because whatever happens, by March 2024, we need to have a network of family hubs in operation in the city. Okay, next slide. So where are we now? The transformation bid for 700k was not successful. I have got over it now. I didn't at the time. I was devastated. And actually, they've only funded, they said they were going to fund 12. They've only funded 7. We don't know why. And there were 83 local authorities submitted a bid, and they're not providing us with feedback because they said there were too many. I had a meeting with Andy Smith last week, and we've decided that I'll approach them to get some feedback, to ask A, why have they only funded 7 and not 12, and please give us some feedback. And I think particularly on the strength of our outstanding inspection and the fact that the city are very proactive in wanting to move with new ideas, that we should perhaps go back to them. But we did get the announcement at the end of May that Derby is one of 75 local areas identified for family hubs funding for Start for Life and 1001 critical days. That's really positive, but it's very early years focused, so it's the first 3 years of life. And I worry, as we get into our older age groups, that actually that doesn't give us the opportunity that we had with our initial bid to offer services across 0 to 25. So the budget committed 301.75 million for the 75 local authorities to deliver Start for Life and family help services. Next slide, please. So that's just a breakdown, really, of where the money sits. We have to publish a Start for Life offer. We have to deliver parenting programmes. We have to deliver support for infant parent mental health support, and that is quite new for the city. I don't think we've really focused on parental mental health, particularly pre and post-natal. We have to deliver breastfeeding support, which we do in abundance, but we'll need to be able to demonstrate it in a different way. And then there's a 10 million for workforce pilots in a small number of local authorities. What they're saying to us is that we must deliver all components to receive the funding. So we've got to sign up to create family hubs, to publish the Start for Life, to do the parenting programmes, the infant parent mental health, the breastfeeding support. Will we be one of those small number of local authorities? We don't know. If I got my way, we would be, because I think we should go for these things, but I don't know whether Department for Health and Department for Education will determine that. Next slide. So the DFE did set some expectations when the information came out around the 75 local authorities, that family hubs were a way of delivering the supporting families vision for an effective early help system. So supporting families is formally troubled families, priority families. It has a new name. So there's got to be that link between the supporting families and the family hub model. I think we're in a really strong position in the city because it already sits within early help. So we support the early help commissioner who's responsible for supporting families to reach their targets of identified families, but also the payment by results. We need to have single point of access for all families so that they're just, these are things that won't surprise you, telling their story once, etc. There needs to be a whole family lead practitioner. And I think, you know, if you look at our inspection report from a local authority point of view, we're really strong at having that lead professional that's coordinating services. There's got to be clear leadership and governance and good data sharing. These are the DFE words, not mine. What can citizens and families expect to be delivered virtually, by outreach and within hubs face-to-face? And I think over COVID, we've become much more efficient at delivering a combined offer. So as well as that face-to-face, getting back to the face-to-face work in children's centres, we need to look at what our virtual offer is and what our offer is in families' homes. And minimum expectations are set out in the programme guide, and it does say list supplied. I'm afraid it isn't because we haven't got it yet. They've given us an idea. There are no surprises. But we have to meet the minimum expectations by the end of March 24. So going back to the timeline, that's where we're at. Okay, next slide, please. So what's next? We have to agree to sign up for Start for Life, 1001 critical days, and I'll just take you back to what we agreed, even if we didn't get the Transformation 1 funding, that we would move towards the Family Hubs model. So I think probably on Wednesday at our board meeting, that will be one of the agreements we're asking for our strategic partners. Yes, are we signing up to this? We need to set up a task and finish group to move this forward, and that needs to be not only myself as the single point of contact, but actually our health partners are critical in this. We need to have that commitment from health across the board to deliver. We do need to decide how we can move forward with plans that we had for the wider offer for family hubs and agree a model. So going back to what I said, this needs to be our direction of travel. How are we going to do it without that 700k that I'd asked for? And to look at sourcing further funding. So there's been a recent opportunity to bid for a youth investment fund. So actually, could we use that and use a proportion of that money to look at activities, targeted activities for those young people who really need that additional support, and really to ensure that whatever we do, we're not duplicating. So we don't want somebody running off in another direction, developing a family hub model that doesn't really fit with what we're doing. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Just for the sake of transparency, those who don't know me, I am a SEND parent as well. However, I don't believe I have any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests that may preclude me from speaking or voting on this item. So, any questions? Councillor Whitby.
Yeah, a few actually. Sorry, just because I'm a bit thick, clearly. Is this the things on the where are we now? The provision that we've got to be offering. Clearly, you're suggesting we're not offering that now, which I'm a bit surprised at.
We are.
We are offering. Okay,
Yeah.
so we are there.
But we've got to offer it to whatever the DfE and the Department for Health want us to deliver it in maybe a different way. So I don't think we focus very much on parent and infant mental health. I think there is some work done by health visitors, by ourselves, as far as those women that may struggle after the birth of a child, and often they're families that do come early help's way. But I don't think there's as much support for families in that way. But we do offer a Start for Life. We offer good antenatal care through midwifery. We've got midwifery in children's centres. We've got good relationships with our health colleagues, so health visitors. If you think about the focus at Laverstock Court, we work jointly with them to deliver health services. So there are a lot of things already happening. What we need to do is to pull it together and draw it into a model, a Start for Life offer.
So I'm just trying to get my head around this.
It's
Single
fine.
point of access. What would the single point of access be? Are we talking children's centres again, or somewhere else?
Well, we're talking family hubs, so not necessarily children's centres, because we know that children's centres have only focused on 0 to 8, families with children 0 to 8, and actually what families need is not to be cut off at 7 3/4 and moved on to somewhere else. What they're asking is that every family within the city know where they can go to get the help they need. So I guess it's like bringing together all of those services into one place and one offer. So it doesn't necessarily need to be face-to-face. So we might have a group of buildings, and this is my vision for what I think it might look like, is that in each locality we've got a number of buildings that include libraries, that include children's centres, community centres, faith groups. So if you think, for example, somewhere like Funability at the St James Centre, there's a real piece of mapping to look at, well, okay, if we go down this model, what do the buildings look like, and what's the brand that sits with them, so families know if they want a family service, they can walk through that door and not be sent somewhere else. That's in the simplest of terms for the moment. It's early days, Councillor Whitby, really.
Okay. And will this in any way diminish what we've got in the children's centres at the moment, which is, I suppose, not quite what it used to be? But
No, and I think recovery from COVID, obviously during COVID we were closed, and if I give you an example of Austin Sunnyhill, that we closed and it became a testing centre. So what we then got was a really blank building once they'd done the repairs that they needed to do after it being a testing centre. And the children's centre manager has really taken the pull of family hubs and thought, well, what can we offer? So she's already in negotiation with some of the local churches around a food bank as part of the Food for Life project. We met with Safe and Sound, so the CEO at Safe and Sound, they're looking for new office premises and actually would like to run some sort of offer for young people. So actually they could move in. So I don't think it'll diminish children's centre activity. I think if anything, it'll get us back to that really lively offer that we used to have.
it just sounds to me like they should be repurposed for 0 to whatever age.
Absolutely.
Because
And
there's one in every ward, isn't there?
Yeah, and that's what we wanted to do with that transformation money. Part of that was rebranding. And, you know, because let's face it, if you're a 15-year-old and you're interested in music, you'd much rather go to Baby People on Foreman Street than turn up at Mackworth Children's Centre, because it says Mackworth Children's Centre.
Everyone wants to go to Mackworth Children's Centre, listen, let's face it.
But, you know, I think that they're the things that we've got to do. We've got to look at this from a really, well, with limited funds, what can we do differently?
Yeah. Okay. And unless, guys, just one more, please. Is that
It's
all right?
fine.
Thank you. It does say youth centres on there.
Yeah.
And I know there is one in Mackworth, but I'm not sure if there's many anywhere else in the city. I mean, is there anyone going to be in there?
Yes, as part of the family hubs, but actually it won't necessarily be the local authority delivering a universal offer. It will be organisations like Safe and Sound, Baby People, people like that. So I met with Baby J from Baby People last week, and he wants to use the centres much more regularly. So really, I think it's about the buildings being part of a family hub, and actually anybody can book them to use them. So actually perhaps not being as protective as we've been in the past and said, oh no, that's my building, you can't use it. We've got to be much more proactive at looking at, well, what's the group of buildings within this locality, what's the family hub offer, and how will we deliver it?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I'd just like to pick up a point that I heard there regarding the only giving funding for the 12 out of 7 that you needed and wanting feedback on that. If the board, for instance, was to write to government ministers or the relevant department saying, you know, this is our plan for Derby and this is what we could do if we had the money to do that, who would we write to? Would it be government ministers? Would it be a certain department? Would it be both?
There's a family hubs department, and that's where my correspondence is coming from as the single point of contact. So I guess the minister in DFE, because it was a DFE, that the 7 out of 12 was a DFE pot of money, not a combined Department for Health and Department for Education. So my view would be that would be where it needed to be targeted. Right, okay, thank you. So if we move on then to the recommendations 3.1 and 3.2 to update the board on the situation and progress made to allow the board opportunity to make further comments or recommendations, I would then like to put forward the following recommendations that as chair of the board that I write to the relevant ministers regarding this, and you know, telling them, you know, with more funding we could do so much more in Derby. I could give you a copy of the bid. Brilliant. So that you want to have a look at it. I can send you both a copy of the bid so that you can have a look at what we got in it and what we wanted to do, because that probably would help. And then, as always, you can email me. I'll respond if you've got questions and those sorts of things. But yeah, I think that would be most welcome, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, thank you, Chair. And just to note that the Children and Families Minister is Mr Will Quince.
Right, yeah. Okay, thank you. Does anyone like to add to that? Are we all happy with that recommendation? Yes? Yeah, I was seconder. Yeah. So anybody against? Nobody against. Okay, thank you, Lindsay. Right, so we move on to the work programme and topic review. Have we all had a look? Are we all happy with this? Anybody like to add anything? This topic. Are we all happy with that? Councillor Whitby?
Are we looking for things to add in to...
If there's anything specific people would like adding, or you can raise it to our meetings.
Yeah.
It's up to you.
Well, there was talking of youth services, there was some of money added into the budget, the last budget, 303,000, I think. Is that right? And I suppose it would be helpful to have some sort of paper on how that's going to be used. You know, what's going to go towards. That would be wonderful.
So an item agenda on new funding.
Yeah,
Yeah?
if youth services and needs, I think the two things. Yeah, please.
Yeah, so can we add that then, Lindsay? We're all happy with that. Okay. So, unless there's anything else. No, we're all happy with that. I'd second that as well. So, yeah, nobody's against. So, yeah, that's fine. So we'll all accept that and we'll move on. Thank you, everyone, for coming this evening. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time. That's the end of the meeting now. Thank you.